I made decisions based upon principles, not politics. I always kept the American people in mind when I made decisions. The job of the president is to make decisions, big and small, but to always make them with a set of core beliefs in your mind and in your soul. I came to Washington with some beliefs, one of which is that the people can spend their money better than the government can. And one way to act on that belief is to cut taxes. And so we worked with leadership in the Congress and cut taxes, not once but twice. I firmly believe that one of the reasons we recovered the way we did after the recession in September the 11th is because of the tax cuts we passed. I believe if you got more money in your pocket, you can spend it wiser than the federal government can spend it. That's why we use the tax code to encourage investment in capital goods, with the understanding that that kind of investment would make companies more productive, as well as increase the likelihood of increased employment. Since 2001, our economy has faced a recession, the bursting of the dot-com bubble, major corporate scandals, an unprecedented attack on our homeland, a global war on terror, a series of devastating natural disasters. Our economy has weathered every one of these challenges and still managed to grow. We will weather this challenge too, and we must do so together. The financial crisis was years in the making, but to prevent it from worsening, we had to take some bold steps. These actions we took were ones that we really didn't want to take, but we did so to stabilize the economy. I made the decision to reform Medicare by adding a prescription drug benefit because the old system wasn't working. We would pay thousands of dollars for a heart surgery, but not a dime to our seniors for the medicines necessary to prevent the heart surgery from being needed in the first place. Now 40 million seniors have got a prescription drug benefit in Medicare, and plans are competing for their business. Sometimes government programs can convince somebody to change their behavior, but sometimes behavioral change requires a change of heart. And government is not good at causing people to change their heart. Religious charities of every creed are doing some of the most vital work in our country. Mentoring children, feeding the hungry, taking the hand of the lonely. Yet government has often denied social service grants and contracts to these groups just because they have a cross or a Star of David or a crescent on the wall. By executive order, I've opened billions of dollars in grant money to competition that includes faith-based charities. I always felt like government ought to say, if your program can save a life, you ought to be eligible for taxpayers' money, so long as you don't use that money for proselytization. Right after September the 11th, a lot of people were asking, what can I do? So we set up what's called USA Freedom Corps that's got a website that links the compassionate soul with a program that needs compassion. During my presidency, upwards of 61 million people have volunteered to help. I think it's very important for schools to measure, to determine whether or not a child can read, write, and add and subtract. And if the answer is yes, they're meeting certain standards, then we ought to praise the teachers and principals and pass the word. However, if we find schools where children cannot read, write, and add and subtract at grade level, then we need to do something about it. The No Child Left Behind Act is one of the most important pieces of civil rights legislation that Congress has passed in the modern era. And the reason I say that is there's an achievement gap in America, a gap between the standards of white kids and African American or Latino kids, for example. And that gap is not good for the United States of America. And thankfully, because we're starting to measure. And thankfully, because the accountability systems enables us to challenge the status quo, that achievement gap is beginning to narrow. The stem cell research issue was a very controversial issue. Some people felt it was okay to destroy embryos in order to develop embryonic stem cells. But I had told the American people I was going to respect and nurture a culture of life. And I truly believe it's wrong to destroy life to save life. And I also felt that if we set some ethical boundaries, science would be able to adjust. And that's what's happened. Adult skin cells now are able to be used to produce the equivalent of embryonic stem cells. So we, on the one hand, have science that's saving life, and on the other hand, we've protected life. Sometimes a president has the high honor of picking an individual for the Supreme Court. In my case, I had that honor twice. And I looked long and hard for people who would be strict constructionists, and by that I mean they wouldn't use the bench to write law. They would interpret our Constitution. And I found two good people, really good people, John Roberts and Sam Alito. When a president chooses a Supreme Court justice, he is placing in human hands the full authority and majesty of the law. They will be around for a long time, and our country will be well served by having judges who understand that unelected members of the judiciary's role is not to write law. I believe free trade is good for our country and good for workers. When I came into office, we only had 3 agreements in force, and today we have 14 agreements in force, which means there's more markets available for our farmers, our small business owners, and our service companies. I am disappointed but not surprised that the legislative branch did not want to tackle Social Security reform, even though it is much less costly to fix the Social Security system today than it will be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I had members of both political parties in essence saying to me that they were unwilling to take the risk necessary to solve it, even though the president was willing to do so. I will leave office feeling very comfortable, however, that I didn't duck the issue. Most of the people coming into our country are good, hard-working people that just simply want to be a good mother or a father. And so for economic reasons, as well as humane reasons, I supported a plan that basically said, okay, you can come into our country to do work, but we want to know who you are, and we want to know where you're going to work, and you can stay for a limited period of time. I felt it was essential that we reformed a system that was not working, that would enable us to better enforce our laws and our border, and at the same time treat people humanely. Energy plays a significant role not only in the economic policy of the country, but in the national security policy of the country. And so I set out the goal of diversifying away from oil. And the only way to do that is through technologies. Energy independence and environmental quality run hand in hand, and therefore this administration pushed hard on a variety of fronts. We need to promote alternative fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel. We need to spend money on research and development so that solar and wind energy become a greater part of the mix. And finally, this country needs to work hard to expand nuclear power. Nuclear power is a renewable fuel, and it helps us protect the environment. In order for America to become less dependent on oil and less dependent on foreign oil, we need to have a comprehensive energy strategy, and that's exactly what my administration has done. You know, people say, well, what's your biggest accomplishment? I don't know. History will judge that. But I'll tell you this, when I get home, I'll look in the mirror and say, I came to Washington with the same set of principles that I returned with.